Jess,
There
if you can.
we go.
Okay.
Got it.
Got it.
Thank you. And I assume that people will just wave their hands if they have something to say, something they want to bring up, or put it in the chat, and that somebody will bop me on the head and say, "Oh, look, there's something in the chat that we need to refer to here." Feel free. I think we have time. You know, this is a short book we're talking about here tonight. Okay, let's start with the history of the text as we understand it. Okay, when Flannery O'Connor is in graduate school, she pulls out a notebook and she writes out her prayers. And there's her handwriting, you know, in the back of the book. So, you know, they you know, typed it up and presented it, and then they did it over again in, you know, a photographic reproduction of her handwriting. So you can see she really did say it the way it's transcribed. And I suppose one could argue that this is on the list of things that Flannery O'Connor definitely did not ever expect anybody to see. So if that bothers you, you know, shame on us all for reading Flannery's prayer book. I mean, you know, it might be right up there. It might be worse than reading somebody's personal diary. But, you know, we English people, we just get our hands on every little thing and we just go to town with it, and we just pry and pry and pry and, you know, look at all secret things and say, ooh, look at that. Now, Flannery saved all sorts of everything. She did at some point know that every piece of paper she scribbled on was going to end up in a special collections library somewhere, and that English teachers were going to look at it. You know, it's still kind of doubtful that she was thinking that when she was starting graduate school. You know, she published one story when she wrote the prayer journal. So another interesting detail about the text, which you probably picked up from looking at it, was she tore out parts of the prayer journal. Now, what does that say? Well, it could be that she used the prayer journal as a kind of reference book. What sorts of things do I like to say to God every once in a while? And she would review them before she, you know, created her next prayer. And sometimes she went through it and she said, oh, I don't like this part. Now, was it because she just didn't want to review that? She just wanted to preserve her greatest hits of prayers? And, you know, when am I on the right track? When am I saying the right things to God? And that's what I should save and the rest I'll tear out. Or was she thinking, someday those school teachers are going to get their hands on this, and there are certain things I want them to see, and there are certain things I don't want them to see. So I'm gonna tear these bits out. If she was already editing this book for future prying eyes, you know, then maybe she was thinking, someday this will be published. Everything I write will be published someday. And so I better take that seriously. She didn't destroy the whole thing. She did keep it. Years ago, when Andalusia was first opening, you know, like 20 or 25 years ago or something like that, Craig Amoson wrote up a whole catalog of everything that Louise Florencourt still had in her possession. And the prayer journal was there. And we knew it existed. Emory bought it. And then Bill Sessions, who was working on the authorized biography of Flannery O'Connor for an awfully long time, was going through the papers and says, oh, look, here's this prayer journal here. I will publish it, and we will sell a gazillion copies. And there was some publicity at the time that the prayer journal came out that said, William Sessions has discovered that there was a prayer journal that Flannery kept. Well, it made them sell some more books, but it wasn't no secret. We knew there was a prayer journal. Even I had been through the catalog and said, wow, look at all this stuff that I can't see. I'm just reading this description of what's out there. So it's like, Columbus discovering America. Well, there were some people who knew that it was there before the guy who published it got his hands on it. He never finished the biography, or he never finished the biography in a publishable form, and I don't think we're ever going to see the William Sessions biography. The product of all those years of work on the part of William Sessions seems to be that he came out with the prayer journal. And his introduction is the most disciplined thing the man ever wrote, in my humble opinion. I think the publishers told him, cut, cut, cut. Don't use too many words to talk about this prayer journal. And, Bill can do it when he was forced to do it. The problem with his biographies, he just kept adding 100 pages every time he turned around and thought of a new angle to add to the biography. So there you go. No, he didn't. Yeah, right. Oh, really? Did he? Oh, okay. You'll have to tell me about that sometime, Heidi, how you helped him. Okay. So where Flannery was in graduate school was she had gotten a story published, The Geranium, the first story that she ever published, which she proceeded then to revise over and over and over her whole life. And Judgment Day was her final attempt to get it right, written at the end of her career. She was probably starting to think about Wise Blood, and working on drafting the early parts of that novel. But she was really at the beginning, and to me, she sounds like a classic sort of graduate student, full of anxiety and self-doubt and self-loathing, and at the same time quite capable of pretentiousness. She's sure she's mediocre, she's sure she's no good, and on the other hand, she's asking, well, how can I become the greatest writer of all time and the greatest Catholic writer? How can I solve the problem of reconciling my faith with my writing goals? And so it's a really interesting mix. We're publishing an interview in the next Flannery O'Connor review where somebody who kind of knew Flannery talks about how she was rather shocked and put off when she read the prayer journal, because she thought that Flannery O'Connor here is revealed as refusing to come out of the box she was in of her youthful religiosity, and she is beginning to discover the modern world by going to Iowa City, and she didn't like it. She wanted to stay in her safe space, and so she's pushing away the modern world. Well, that's one take on it, and that's one negative take on it. There's also the negative take that we said it's like we're reading her private diary. We shouldn't be looking at this at all. This is not nice doing what we're doing here, but here we are. And I've gotten over that, and in my studying Flannery for more years than she lived, I just think, well, anything else that comes along, I'll look at that. I'll look at that too. How is she finding the modern world? to me, the answer is somebody told her to read Freud and Jung, and she knew they were important, and she feared that they might be right about something, and she reacted against them while taking their ideas very seriously. And I find this fascinating. I always thought there was psychological depth to Flannery O'Connor characters. I didn't think they were cartoonish at all. And to think, Flannery from the beginning of her life is thinking about psychoanalysis, um, confirms me in my folly, that, okay, that's what it's all about. It ain't simple at all. It's very complicated. And Flannery is trying to get at how the different parts of the psyche are at odds. She's talking all the way through here about her religious sense and how she doesn't feel like she's getting it right. And she goes through these fascinating debates with herself about what's the place of the mind, of the intellect in being religious, and what's the place of the emotions. You know, Flannery O'Connor has a really good BS detector. And, it's one of the reasons I love her. And she is, one of the appealing things about the prayer journal for a lot of people is that she doesn't go in for piety. Anytime she starts to get she starts to get sappy about religiosity, she shoots herself down. She says, that's not it. That's not right. There's something wrong with what I'm saying right now. And I'm in the wrong place. My head's in the wrong place. My soul's in the wrong place if I have such a thought. And that's really, I find that very appealing about the prayer journal, that she can go back and forth with herself about that. There are times when, I think this is in Bill Sessions's introduction, where she's trying to create a love relationship with God through the prayer journal. And, here we've got the cynical anti-romantic Flannery O'Connor thinking that the key thing about being a good Catholic writer is that she should figure out a way to get her emotions and her feelings into her religious sense and into her writing more effectively. Did she ever figure that out? Well, she wrote all these great stories, so she figured it out enough for our purposes, I guess I can say. What other opening comments do I have about this book? It really does end with a downer. Flannery did not try to end this on a cheery, upbeat, this solves all of our problems kind of a note. It's almost as if she's pulling the rug out from under herself on the final page of this thing, saying, there's nothing more to say about me. This, like, it's a hopeless case. Gluttony and lustful thoughts, are what Flannery O'Connor's about. Well, give yourself a break, darling. It's not representative of the whole thing, but she was going through the thing and tearing out pages. How in the world did she end up deciding that was what should be on the last page of the prayer journal? Fascinating question. Okay, what else? I said something about Flannery being a graduate student. Okay, I'm going to be anti-intellectual for a moment. I'm going to say, I can't believe that Flannery O'Connor, the great writer I love, could have come up with that phrase that she uses, the unconscious superconsciousness, that she could throw that in there with a straight face. What Bible talk. That sounds like something somebody would say in a graduate seminar that makes you want to strangle them. And I'm sure she thought she knew what she meant by that when she said it. And I dismiss it as, opaque, as incomprehensible to anybody. But it meant something to her, and she was taking psychoanalysis seriously, and she thought it was something that she really needed to figure out if she was going to live in the modern world of today and adjust. And she thought she needed to, for all the comments in the fiction about, you don't want to adjust to the modern world because it's a mess. Um, so I guess that's my idea. Is that even an idea? About all that talk about psychology in this book. She needed to talk to God about it and express her anxieties and did she find her solution to that problem? I mean, my answer would be, yeah, sure, because she wrote great stories. And that's what the goal was, right? Okay, now let's say a few things about Wildcat. On the one hand, I'm going to introduce it. I'm going to say nice things about Wildcat when I introduce it on campus. Okay, count on it. On the other hand, I'm publishing 2 pretty negative reviews of Wildcat in the Flannery O'Connor review that's going to come out in like 2 weeks. I'm getting the envelopes together to stuff, and I'm going to try to get in the mail so everybody's got it before the conference. And of course, there are 500 errors of fact in that movie, which scholars are happy to list. And how does one get around that if one is able to make the list of the 500 errors of fact in the film? This is the rough draft for my introduction of the film, I guess. The film makes the case, I mean, among many other things that it's doing, the film makes the case that Flannery's consistent, that who she was when she was writing the prayer journal, which Maya Hawke read and said, oh, I want to play this person in a movie, who she was with all of her anxieties in the 40s is still who she was when she was the famous writer. I mean, the person who had written all these great stories and won prizes and, almost 20 years later. And I have been accused of being the kind of critic who forces Flannery into consistency. And I think I should just admit that, yeah, I tend to see her as consistent, that the early Flannery is pretty much the late Flannery. And I can say, yeah, it makes sense to me to have a scene at the end of Wildcat in which Flannery is expressing her anxieties to a priest the way she did when she was in graduate school. I think, sure, Flannery was full of anxiety. She was still full of self-loathing. All she had to do was think about her mother, and she could be off to the races, feeling all sorts of conflicted, negative, anxious emotions. And that's at every age. And that's one of the things that the film illustrates over and over and over. Every story is about Flannery and Regina, Flannery and her mama, and the war between them, which never quite gets resolved, and thank goodness that it didn't and couldn't. So if you put aside all the things that are in the movie that didn't actually happen, and you just say, okay, do we, if this is the issue, do we think that Flannery O'Connor was always Flannery O'Connor? Or do we think that by, the year she died, she was a totally different person than who she was 20 years earlier? that will, if you think she grew and grew and grew and matured and became a totally different person over the years, then you're going to be less satisfied with that movie than you are if you think it's all of a piece. Okay. And that's putting aside all the stuff that the Hawkeses made up about Flannery's life. And I don't know, there are objections to implying that Flannery wrote her late stories while she was in graduate school, for example. She didn't write Parker's Back. She didn't write Revelation right off the bat. That was at the end of her life that she wrote those stories. Okay, it's factually wrong. But what if the film makes us think about whether Flannery's graduate school anxieties are still in those stories? And I would say, for example, O.E. Parker, whose mind is pretty useless, but whose emotions and heart are in the right place, I guess. He seems to me to be the early Flannery, in a way, or one conception of herself in graduate school. That she might think that she could be an O.E. Parker. Carol Schloss once wrote an essay for me for the Flannery O'Connor Review, in which talked about Parker's Back as an allegory for Flannery to talk about all of her anxieties and all of her failures, all the ways in which she never managed to do what she wanted to do as a writer. Well, if you look at Parker's Back that way, and you think about her writing that on her deathbed practically, well, then the end of the life is like what she was doing in graduate school. And when you throw everything about somebody's life into the blender and you just mix it all up the way the film does, it might make you see connections between the different parts of Flannery O'Connor's life that you've ignored because you thought sequence really mattered. Okay, I've said that. I took too long saying that. Teresa, you've got your hand up. Why don't you talk? Oh, you have to unmute.
Yes, I unmuted. It took me a while since I haven't been on Zoom. I had two thoughts, and you've kind of gotten ahead of them, but I'm going to say them anyway. I know that everybody has probably read Pat Conroy, and he obviously had a lot of issues going on with his life. And when I think he found peace, that's when his creativity stopped, and his books became, for me, duller. But so that's one thought. And then I'm reading War and Peace this year. It's my testimony to perseverance. And Leo Tolstoy, per some critics, got a lot of things factually wrong, but other critics say that he factually, well, not factually, but he really described what war is like very accurately. And I've been thinking about that for the last, 10 months or 8 months as I've been reading War and Peace. And that's something for me to continue to dwell on. And would it be relevant to this movie as well?
Is Wildcat like War and Peace? It's just like it. No difference. It's shorter. There's the emotional effect that can be totally different from the factual record. I think nobody would claim that Wildcat is right up there with War and Peace in its ability to get at the real truth of something. But most fiction writers make some stuff up. And when we think of biopics, when we think of films that are about lives of authors, we usually hold them to a pretty high standard on the the factual record thing. And, see how you feel when you read these two reviews of Wildcat that I'm publishing, and all of the flaws are spelled out for you about how much of that can you forgive. But nobody who it's very hard for a creative artist not to add and change a lot about what happened. Craig, you had your hand up.
Yeah, just a question. Can I ask who the reviews are written by?
Sure, Ralph Wood and Carol Schloss.
Got it. And can I make a two-pronged recommendation?
Certainly.
For those who have not seen Wildcat yet, if you download it from Amazon or Netflix or whatever, I'd recommend putting closed captions on. When we saw it at the Milwaukee Theater here, we thought the problem with the audio was with the theater. And other people have said the audio is not 100%. So in a movie this nuanced, people have said that turning closed captions on is a very good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's number one. For those who have seen the movie, I'd recommend tracking down David King's review of Wildcat. David King, and Bruce, I think you know David.
Mm-hmm.
David King is a professor at Kennesaw State. He is both a literature critic and a film critic. And of all of the reviews I've seen, and it is probably in the 30s, in my opinion, David's is the best.
Hmm.
So might be worthwhile checking it out if you've seen Wildcat. I think it's very good. And you can find it just by Googling the Georgia Bulletin, which is where Flannery's reviews used to be published, and search for David King, or just search Wildcat. I think it's the first thing that comes up.
Okay. I'll look
Thank
that up. Thank you. John Dunaway, if you'll unmute.
Yeah, thank you. I watched Wildcat a couple of times and took some notes so I could talk to my oldest son, who is a starving artist filmmaker. And, I just cannot believe that those fake previews of coming attractions has anything to add to this film. I know that Ethan probably wanted to say through that, hey, y'all, this is not going to be a Hollywood movie, but to me, it just really detracts. What do y'all think?
Was that the only preview that was stuck onto the movie? That's the only one I remember. The one with
There were several scenes there, several scenes in the previews, but I don't know, it just really did not fit with the film.
Yeah, I mean, it's like intentionally shocking. I mean, when I started watching the movie, I said, "Is this the beginning? We're starting here."
I wasn't sure that was even the right film.
Yeah, right. Are we in the right theater? Should we go down to the next auditorium? Well, I would say, okay, that's personal taste. It's there were some times when I was not sure which story we were talking about right now. And that's the main thing I want to try to pin down for myself on a second viewing is whether I can figure out when are we talking about which story or which part of which novel, and can I make everything be about some piece of fiction? I heard somebody say, I don't think it was King, that people who really know O'Connor are going to be troubled by all the factual errors, and people who don't know O'Connor are just going to be confused a lot, because You have
Yeah.
to be somewhere in the middle where you know a little bit about O'Connor, enough to know which story we're talking about now. So you can try to put the puzzle pieces together. But if you know too much, you'll just be making your list of, oh, here are all the factual errors, and you'll be in for an unpleasant thing. I haven't talked to many people who've seen the film more than once, and I wonder whether it's going to be what it's going to be like on multiple viewings. I swear I've seen The Displaced Person. I've seen The Displaced Person, 300 times, and Wise Blood 300 times. And I think I like them better the more I see those films over and over and over and over and over. I appreciate
I liked it immediately the first time I saw it, but my son, the filmmaker, said he didn't really like it until about the third or fourth time he saw it.
Okay. So it's like Flannery O'Connor. You gotta revisit and revisit and revisit and get over your initial reaction against it. Maybe. I don't know. I'm out of the teaching biz now, but I wonder what it's going to be like for people who take this film into the classroom and try to use this as an introduction to Flannery O'Connor. Or people who at the end of a class on Flannery O'Connor show the film as a kind of fun thing to do at the end of the semester. It's hard to predict how it will go over with student audiences. Here's another plug I wanted to put in. If you're not subscribed to the blog that Andalusia puts out, you might want to contact Andalusia, Cassie Manel, and tell her that you want to subscribe to Assorted Regards. Yesterday, I think it was, she put out the most recent blog posting, and it was about Panhandle Slim, the artist in Savannah, who does lots of paintings with a little portrait of Flannery O'Connor and a quote from O'Connor off to the side. He loves the prayer journal, and he's got a lot of paintings just on that blog posting. Picture after picture after picture after picture of Flannery with one line from the prayer journal. It's like, okay, Panhandle Slim has decided, boy, this book really says it. This tells you where Flannery is coming from. And nobody's going to look at those paintings and say, oh, well, this is probably a graduate student who hadn't written anything much yet saying stuff like this. No, it sounds like it's going to impress people. And it does sound like Flannery, as mature as she ever was and as serious about her writing as she ever was. So there's something else to check out. And if you've never seen Panhandle Slim's paintings, that's fun. Okay, one other angle on all of this stuff, and I've kind of hinted at this, but for some people, they read anything about Flannery O'Connor and they immediately want to ask the question, what does this tell me about the fiction? How am I going to relate what's in the prayer journal to the fiction? And we've only talked about that in very vague terms about her attitude. But one can connect some more dots. I mean, I could say, for example, that the voice I hear when I'm reading the prayer journal sounds very much like the child who has no name, who's the main character of A Temple of the Holy Ghost. She says over and over that when she's in church, it just doesn't seem right to her, and she wants something more. And I guess she gets it by the end of the story, the something more. But it seems to me that's Flannery taking what she's feeling in graduate school and saying, I felt like this as a child. And this is about as a profound a statement I can make, is to revisit childhood in a way that expresses how I'm feeling now. And maybe she was always the little girl in a Temple of the Holy Ghost. If you've ever read that MFA story called The Crop about Miss Willerton, who's trying to be a writer but really struggling and not sure she's ever going to do it, and who gets carried away with her emotions and starts to look like maybe a writer there for a little while in that story. It seems to me it's very easy to connect what's in The Crop to what's in the prayer journal. I think that some of the anxieties that are expressed by Ruby Hill in what became A Stroke of Good Fortune, it was supposed to be part of Wise Blood, and Flannery took it out of the novel and made it into a story. Some of the anxieties of that young woman seem to me to be similar to the anxieties of Flannery in the prayer journal, even though by the time she wrote A Stroke of Good Fortune, she's like 90% satirizing Ruby Hill, but she's worth satirizing because it's close to home stuff. I think I said my bit about O.E. Parker as an expression of Flannery's feelings, even though that's a very late story. The Enduring Chill, when I read that passage in here where Flannery's saying, writing is dead, art is dead, I'm amazed that Flannery O'Connor could say that, but then I think, well, that sounds like something that Asbury might have thought at some point in The Enduring Chill, and everybody says that's one of her most autobiographical stories. So maybe that's another purpose of the prayer journal, is for us to understand how Flannery could think that she is like that character in a story from the second half of her career. And one last connection, and other people will think of more. In The Bound Buried Away, old Tarwater's constantly acting like he can give God orders, and God always slaps him down. He gets his comeuppance over and over and over, even though Flannery's totally on old Tarwater's side. It seems to me that you read the prayer journal and you can see Flannery seeing herself in this character she's going to put into a novel, like 15 years later. It's not like she completely changed her attitude towards the world for the second novel. Katie, I see you have your hand up. What do you want to say?
Well, this is going back to Wildcat. So picking up a few comments. So I saw it 3 times. I consider myself not, let's see, I wrote my undergraduate thesis on O'Connor, and I've published on O'Connor, and I teach O'Connor. So I'm perhaps know O'Connor more than the average film goer, but not quite as much as some of the people writing the reviews. And I love the film the first time. The second time, I went with 2 non-specialists, my mother-in-law and her friend, and that was my main question, like, how does this land if you're not in O'Connor, if you haven't read her work? And they loved it. They followed it. They thought it was fine. Now they attend Sacred Heart Church, so they have an insider kind of idea of wanting to know, but they weren't confused at all, and that was my main concern. I think it's not meant to be a biopic at all. My understanding is that Ethan Hawke said when he spoke about it in Savannah at the college, SCAD, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's a poetic homage. It's not meant to be a biography. And the biographical, even on their own website, it just says it follows her life at the time that she was getting established as a writer. Mm-hmm. It isn't trying to go into the end of her life. It doesn't have any death scenes. It doesn't have that. Mm-hmm. So it's meant to be like a 3-year period or so, 4-year period. And in that way, I thought, but then it's not a biopic because it's really about these films within the film that Ethan Hawke has made. And he's made 4 little films that are O'Connor films. And that's a giant contribution to the filmic oeuvre, if you will, right? The oeuvre, what do we have when we show films about O'Connor? We have, like you said, Wise Blood. We have a few things. And so he's created, and I think that's where those fake film, whatever you want to call them, the previews come in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, is that he's kind of signaling like, these are all films within the film, because you could excerpt those as standalone films, if
Yeah.
you would.
If
You know,
you,
about a short story. And if you're teaching that short story, you could show that only, that, and say, what do you think of this character? How they depicted it? They made choices. Do you agree with those choices? You read the story, and I think Maya Hawke, was inspired by that prayer journal because it reminds me of like Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man, right? That kind of idea. And as she was sort of thinking about, did she want to pursue a career in acting, she adapted some of the prayer journal into a monologue for her her audition at Julliard, right? And they said that was a really bold decision, kind of something O'Connor would do, because most people don't bring their own original material that they've adapted. They take a kind of standard monologue when you're auditioning for Julliard. And she has, Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke for parents. So she was bold. But, I think that monologue, in fact, was the scene with the priest, right? That was the monologue she did. So they have that at the center of the film. But I really didn't have that expectation that it was going to be the Brad Gooch biography is treating the whole life. This is a slice of life to me, and a slice of life as relates to some poetic interpretation of stories, right? So I don't know if that, but I really was concerned that the non-specialists I attended, and I thought they were going to join today, they probably couldn't figure out the Zoom, that they would I mean, I was coaching for an hour today about how to get on the
how to
Zoom.
get into the Zoom?
Didn't work. But they loved the film. They were entertained. They thought it was great. They didn't think it was a problem. They weren't confused, and so I don't know how much you need to know. That's a really good question, I think maybe knowing too much ruins it more so than the other way, possibly. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, it could be. One thought that, came to me is that if you just look at it as, okay, you're being introduced to this writer who came up with everything she ever wrote because she had this ongoing battle with her mother. And over and over and over and over and over, she comes up with these imaginative situations where she and her mother can have the next chapter of their big fight. That, to me, draws together a lot of what's going on in the film. And if the prayer journal, maybe gives somebody an angle on the film and helps them understand the film, or the film prepares somebody to take the prayer journal seriously, fine,
Yeah, and a lot of the words were taken from the prayer journal.
Yeah, a lot of words
in her story.
A lot of words in here from the prayer journal.
Yeah. So I think somebody else would have to make the other movies that you might want about O'Connor. This is a particular movie about, and I think it's going to appeal to a generation who wouldn't have entree to O'Connor, but they love Maya Hawke. Apparently in Savannah, there were 2,000 students screaming her name when she came on stage because she's a big star and she has a lot of cachet. So that's the demographic that they might have been wanting to reach when they made the film as well, right? A generation that might not have any use for O'Connor and think she's irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
I was sort of, I don't know, but I
don't see how this film is going to do any harm to Flannery O'Connor.
No, it's created a buzz.
It's going to make people maybe be puzzled, but they're at least going to be intrigued. And so, what's the harm in that? Craig?
Just a quick question of Katie. So how was your third viewing of the movie?
Oh, yeah.
Loved it. I loved it. I'll see it a million times. I loved it.
See it a million times.
I mean, I'm somebody who's watched a bunch of YouTube videos made by students of Flannery films. So this is like a really beautiful version.
You should all know Katie went on YouTube and watched every student video based on Flannery O'Connor that had been posted on YouTube. Oh, the poor thing, she survived.
Yeah.
the
Well,
experience.
apparently it's a really popular assignment in high schools to
You go make your own film.
make your film about this story. And so I watched a bunch of them to show, and then I showed clips of them in the composition class and had students write about it. So to me, this is Ethan Hawke's very good YouTube
YouTube video.
with paid actors and makeup.
Something of a
And
film.
cinematography. I mean, I think it's great. I loved it. I thought it was beautifully made, you know, so I don't mind having beautiful images of O'Connor paraded in front of me. You know, I saw it 3 times in a week because it was in Milledgeville for 1 week.
I saw it on consecutive days, and the second time I viewed it, I was actually moved to tears by 2 of the scenes. The one scene with Father Liam, and the second scene shortly thereafter, where she, on her crutches, rearranges her room to stay there for the duration. Incredibly powerful, both.
Yeah.
That's me.
Don't tell Ralph.
Oh, yeah.
You were moved to tears. Well,
Yeah.
I warn you, don't. So.
I've had an interesting dialogue with Ralph.
And
He only sends me negative reviews, and he won't accept positive reviews.
okay. All right, we still got 4 minutes. Anybody want to talk about the line in the prayer journal that they loved most that they can't believe we haven't been talking about all evening? Yeah, Craig?
Hey, my very favorite one, and you'll hear it more when I'm in Milledgeville in September, is the very first prayer. I've tried several times to get people to create the picture that depicts that prayer. I just think it's incredibly powerful. That's all.
Moon image. Is that what you're talking about?
It starts on page 3. Dear God, I cannot love thee the way I want to. You are the slim crescent of a moon that I see, and myself is the earth's shadow that keeps me from seeing all the moon. The crescent is very beautiful, and perhaps that is all one like I am, should, or could see. But what I'm afraid of, dear God, is that myself shadow will grow so large that it blocks the whole moon, and that I will judge myself by the shadow that is nothing. I do not know you, God, because I am in the way. Please help me to push myself aside. That's just incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought that scene in the film with Liam Neeson was the most powerful scene of all. It was just a great conversation between the 2 of them.
Okay. Anybody? So Heidi, you've got your hand up.
This one to me, it's on page 25. And again, thinking that she's not even 23 years old when she writes this. No one can be an atheist who does not know all things. Only God is an atheist. The devil is the greatest believer, and he has his reasons. That one needs to be on a t-shirt.
Oh, that's right. You want to be stopped in the street so people can comment on your t-shirt with that passage on it.
Well, I do have a t-shirt that says Murder, Mayhem, and Misfits, brought to you courtesy of Flannery O'Connor.
Here in town, yes.
And I wore that to Target the other day, and a lady stopped me and thanked me for my t-shirt. But have you read all 3 of these things that are going on here? But yeah.
You know, one of the things that I think of when I get to page 25 with that passage you just read is just imagine all the stuff that's going on in Flannery O'Connor's mind that she doesn't write down.
Yeah.
And these little bits get recorded, and it's like you're looking at the steam that's coming out of the pressure cooker, and you know, just these little bits, and still she rejects some of it and rips the pages out sometimes. I don't begin to understand that passage, but it's certainly worth thinking about. As you know, it's it fills the page. It's clearly something she's putting white space around so that it'll hit her when she revisits it. She's not gonna miss, oh, what did I say on that page? No, she's gonna revisit that, and it's like the way it's set up makes it more important, even though it's perhaps hard to make sense of. Okay. I like the line about, I hope Finding Grace isn't as hard as Kafka made it out to be. I thought that was a really cool thing. I wish I'd run across that line years ago, because I started reading Flannery O'Connor, but I mean, seriously, because I was told that she was like an American Kafka. And people go back and forth about how much of a connection is there between those two, but to me it's real close. But I didn't know that Flannery ever got around to reading Kafka. It took me a long time to see that the connection is real. See, we're out of time. Teresa, email me about the Flannery O'Connor review and all will be explained.
Okay.
What do you want to say as a final thought?
All right. This is perhaps the weirdest comment. Today I've proved myself a glutton for Scotch oatmeal cookies and erotic thought. I have to think about that one. Just, I don't know where she's going with that. And
yeah, there are passages I have read in manuscripts where gluttony and sex go together. They are one. And Flannery relates. She's not just standing out on the side being pure and non-gluttonous and saying that has nothing to do with me. Hey, she's saying I'm right there with characters who feel that way. Well, it was Carolyn Gordon's blurb about O'Connor as Kafka that got me going. Oh my God, I was started on Flannery O'Connor by a blurb on Wise Blood written by Caroline Gordon. Caroline Gordon. Okay, is that a hand up? No, that's just my cursor floating around on the page. Okay, I guess we will declare victory. Thank you all very much. Hope to see some of you in Milledgeville in September, and we will be back for more books in starting in October.
Bruce,
yeah.
Bruce, Carolyn Gordon did not pronounce it Caroline.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, what kind of Southerner is she? I've been told that no respectable Southerner would say Carolyn, that they have to say Caroline. Maybe
Yeah,
she didn't want to be a Southerner.
She would also not allow you to say Mrs. Gordon or Mrs. Tate or anything. She was Miss Gordon. Miss Gordon.
She taught Flannery many things by giving Flannery something to fight against and learn from at the same time. I think that was a struggle. It was just like Flannery and Mama, that relationship with her mentor. And Christine Flanagan, will tell me I'm wrong about that at any opportunity. Okay, she'll be here. Christine will be here in Milledgeville. If you come to Milledgeville, you got 100 Flannery fans, many of whom have published extensively, standing around waiting to talk about it. And so, you're certainly welcome to tackle anybody whose name you recognize from a name tag and make them answer questions for you while you're in town. What else are conferences for? Meals, tackling people on the sidewalk. Those are major parts of academic conferences. Oh yeah, we have our presentations and all that too. Okay. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. See you in September at the conference or October for the next one. Thank you, Bruce.
Okay. I'm having fun.